Hi, everyone. Welcome back, and welcome to our first MEL Talk. And so just real briefly, MEL Talk is where my brother and I just sit and in comfy and interview any of the speakers and just kind of just elaborate on maybe what they would have talked about, get them talking. It also gives you an opportunity to talk to them directly, ask questions, and they get to respond, and that sort of thing. I get to get a little personal with maybe their lives and that sort of thing, okay? So this is Marc, and I kind of want to talk a little bit about what he talked about because he said some very good key points that stood out to me, okay? And I jotted them down. And so the first thing he said that stood out to me, and the reason why it stood out to me because he stole the first liner of my presentation for tomorrow. So I'm going to say it. But he said, failure is not fatal or final. And we all know that's very true, right?
Absolutely.
We're all still alive.
Absolutely.
That's my liner for tomorrow.
Exactly
Okay.
right.
Disclaimer. But he talked about, he said something, seasons season you.
Yes.
He had to go through a season that seasoned him.
Yes.
I just want you to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so, obviously, when you're working and for men, as I was taught by Pastor Miles, the first thing a man has is work. Before he had woman, he had a job. And so a large part of a man's identity is his professional life. And when your professional life is disrupted, it affects your sense of self. And while I was going through that season of disruption, what the Lord did was recalibrate how I was perceiving things. Something I should have shared in the talk that I didn't was one day it was probably 7-8 months, probably a year into the journey. And I was having my time with the Lord and I was just complaining, to be honest. I was complaining. I was like, God, I handle my business. I take care of my wife and daughter. I'm a tither. I'm diligent. And something is not working. I don't get why this isn't working. Why, basically I'm saying, God, I'm holding up my end of the bargain. Why aren't you holding up yours, right? That's, if we're keeping it 100, that's kind of where my head was. And I was in the book of Genesis, and he said, Marc, whenever God asks you a question, you're about to go to school, right? And so he said, Marc, did Adam have a job in the garden? I said, yes. He said, did Adam collect a paycheck? I said, no. He said, was he productive? I said, yes. Was he provided for? He said, yeah. I said, yes. And so he said, why are you missing the presence of my provision due to the absence of a paycheck? And I just had to go, I repent, I'm sorry, you got it, right? And that became, for the balance of my time out of work, that became the way I centered, right? That I wasn't going to miss the presence of his provision due to the absence of a paycheck. And once my mind shifted that productivity is what God is after, and productivity doesn't require a paycheck for there to be provision. And that was the seasoning I needed. That sentence really just shifted and matured me in a way that I probably wouldn't have gotten matured if I wasn't in that season.
So we've heard from your professional side.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get a little personal. So you are married.
Yes.
You did not introduce your wife, so now would be the best time.
Okay. Well, so she is on the panel as well, and so I am married to Jessie Thompson, the mother of, as Pop would say, the mother of all my children, right? Who I love with all my heart, my liver, my lungs, my pancreas, right? You guys are familiar with that kind of introduction. So if you don't mind, stand please, Jessie, even though you'll be on stage tomorrow. That is my wife. And we have a miracle baby. Her name is Miss Nia Madison, and I'm sure she will make her presence felt while she is here. Yeah, you will hear from her, I'm sure. I'm positive of that. Yeah.
So I brought up Jesse because for those that are married and in business, or unmarried in business wanting to get married, how did, as the man of the home and you going through what you're going through, how did that affect your marriage, if at all? And how did that affect Jesse as the wife, the person you're supposed to be leading and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So everything affects everything else, right? So if I were to tell you, because it affected me, it affected our relationship, right? Again, as we've been taught, a marriage is an omelet, and the omelet is only as good as the quality of the two eggs, right? And so it doesn't matter if one egg is perfect, if the other one is rotten, you got a bad omelet. And there were periods in that process where I was probably a rotten egg. Like, I was hard to deal with, right? Because I am very much a get it done, be productive, be a provider, occupy your role as a leader in the home kind of guy. And although I know my position isn't predicated on my economics, I know every day my wife and daughter don't need to wake up unsure of what's going to happen. And so some of that pressure is pressure I put on myself. And Jesse and Neil were fine. They were like, look, we know we're eating, we know the roof ain't gonna collapse, we know we're going on vacation, you know, she's going to private school, none of that stuff is gonna be disrupted. But because I wasn't where I felt I should be, I'm sure I got on her nerves many a day. And so she probably had to pray more than she used to. I'm sure my temper at times flared, right? Where the people who are closest to you, they're the ones that get the shrapnel when you blow up, right? Because that's where you feel safest, right? Is in your own home. So I'm sure there were days where I wasn't my best, and I didn't communicate as eloquently as I do on stage right now when something didn't go the way I wanted it to go. But she was strong and she was supportive, and she kept undergirding me with encouraging words and, telling me what I needed to know in the moments, like, he's faithful, he's going to come through, and you are going to something greater than what you ever thought. This doesn't define you. This is going to be a season, and we'll look back and, as the old folks say, wonder how we got over, right? And that's kind of where we are right now.
So you talk about, in business, we all go through challenges. We are at the top for however long, and then in no time we can be down here. Exactly. Lost a job, 19 months you're without a job. Yep. And everyone handles that differently. Mm-hmm. But so as a social worker, I'm listening with that social work air, counseling air, okay, let me hear this problem and see how I can help you get out of that. Was there ever a time in that 19-month period where you were depressed or you felt, completely down and hopeless?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's any man that goes through a disruption in his professional life is going to go through a roller coaster where especially when you're better than the situation you're facing. You're all, at least me, right? I'm a thinker, and so I'm constantly trying to come up with solutions for what I'm facing. And when my best thoughts don't produce the outcome that I want, I go back to thinking, and that you ebb and you flow. What kept me from being what I would think would be classified clinically depressed is the fact that I knew it wasn't personal, it wasn't pervasive, it wasn't permanent. I had the potential, the power, the capability, the agency to affect the outcome in the long term, right? I couldn't change what was happening today, tomorrow, yesterday, the day before, but I absolutely knew that over time I was going to win. I was going to outlast this problem. I knew that for a fact.
Now, how did you make yourself not make decisions in that time of it being temporary? Because there's that saying, don't make permanent decisions.
Yeah, you don't make permanent decisions on temporary emotions. Like, the reality is, I had good teaching, I had good mentoring, I had good instruction, I had access to excellent resources, and I'm not just talking about the stuff that I got from Papa Miles, but I'm talking about in my leadership development. one of the reasons I left the NFL to go to General Electric was General Electric at the time was the #1 leadership training organization in the world. And I kind of felt there was going to be a Joseph Egypt kind of experience where I would get trained to be a leader at the world's leading organization on top of everything that I knew coming out of Scripture. I just thought it was going to be the right combination of things, and by God's grace it turned out to be, because I was able to keep things in balance more or less because I knew what to do naturally and spiritually that came together to be a potent combination.
So you talk about balance, which is exactly where I was going next. And so when you're not being this financial guru, 'cause every financial to me, they're very just analytical and just logical and, you know, on a straight and narrow.
That's me.
Exactly. When you're not that financial person, what are you doing for fun? What is your, when you think about balance and being well balanced across the board, when you're not doing that, when you're not even being a dad or a husband, what do you do for fun? What do you do for leisure?
So I don't know if I don't know if I'm ever not thinking about money and its implications, because I probably am. I think I literally, like, one of the ways I change my eating habits is I calculate how much I'm spending on something for a year. And I'll be like, you know what, I could buy a piece of stock and that would give me more money, so I'm just going to stop doing that and buy the stock.
Poor Jesse.
Yeah, literally. But what I do for fun, I like to hang out with my family, hang out with my friends. You know, I'm getting closer to 50, and so basketball used to be something I played. Now it's just something I remember playing, right? And reading and travel and, you know, just being with quality people. That's really how I like to recreate. I got a set of friends that are men who pour into my life and lives I pour into, and we, you know, we do different things, but I definitely know how to unwind and watch. There's some TV that I really enjoy, and so there's some shows that I'm kind of dedicated to.
What shows?
So it depends, right? I'm definitely like a Criminal Minds kind of person. Yeah, I like Criminal Minds.
Keep going.
Yeah. Suits. Are you
Keep going.
Suits. On Netflix, there's a couple of shows like Marcella. Have you ever watched Marcella? Marcella's a good show. Queen Sugar, yes.
Okay. Now we're talking.
Queen,
now we can have a conversation.
So Queen Sugar. What's the other one we watch on? This Is Us. My wife has me watching This Is Us. Yeah, watching This Is Us.
Okay, good. So he does know how to unwind. There's some balance going on.
Yeah.
Criminal Minds.
Absolutely. Criminal Minds is not relaxing. I agree.
No,
that's not. Yeah,
that
raises your stress level. I agree.
So you mentioned money.
Yes.
And money isn't the end all be all, but apparently in business it's so important. And I say apparently because I learned that now that I am in this position that I'm in from a leadership standpoint, you know, running a foundation, working with my brother with all of the companies that my parents left behind, and then building my own brand.
Yep.
It isn't the end all be all, but money is, for some reason, it's important.
Yeah.
Either you need to have it, or you need to have enough of it, or you need to know how to talk it.
Yeah. Zig Ziglar is famous for having said, money isn't everything, but it rates right up there with oxygen.
Yes,
right?
yes, it's a necessity.
that you want it, you want it to be there when you need it.
So where do you find that fine balance with how important it is, and when to back off of the fact that money should be number one, and then, you know, just from a standpoint of I have it, I don't have it. You know, I listened to Erica, and for her, she didn't have any money, but she was still able to do all she can with the mental resources she had, the human resources she had, and then money came later.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not always like that. Sometimes you need to have money first and everything else follows.
Yep. So what I would say is you definitely want to expand the conversation beyond just money and think resources, because sometimes when you think just greenbacks and dead presidents, it limits your thinking. And I love what Erica said in her presentation, that limited resources kind of invokes you to be innovative. And so you definitely do want to have economics and finance as part of your resource framework, but it shouldn't be the only thing that makes you feel wealthy. It shouldn't be the only thing that makes you feel complete. But, love and affection doesn't pay mortgages and send children to school, so you need enough of the greenbacks to get that done.
And dead
presidents. And dead presidents. And so that's kind of how...
that. Greenback to dead presidents.
So that's kind of how I keep things in perspective. You have to be able to take care of your responsibilities, and you want to be... The way I think about wealth and wealth accumulation is you want to be able to do everything you need to do for your family and then have enough to invest in other people's dreams. And so the way the Thompson family kind of operates financially is we want to be excellent stewards over our responsibilities and create enough excess capacity that we, as the scripture says, can abound to every good work by investing and giving, because we have enough to take care of ourselves. There are some people who $1 million is enough to take care of themselves, but then they make $5 million. Well, that extra $4 million is a way that you can go and do more and impact more. I want to get to the million, and then we can handle the 5 million. That's kind of how I think about it.
So while we're talking about money, I think this is the perfect time to open the floor for questions that you may have for Marc based on his presentation, just some questions you have. Maybe you're going through a particular place in your business, in your organization, and you want to know something about money or finance, or just piggyback on his story. We have 2 mics on the end, and we'll take questions. There's this daughter back there.
Can I ask a question?
Give me your name and your question.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pamela McDaniels Jerry, and I'm from Chicago. And one of the questions, well, the place where I am is like ground zero. But I know my purpose, and that's why I'm here. So things that God downloaded in me, I have questions. And one of the questions that I have is, I have a pretty good credit score. And I'm, emerging from that poverty mindset. I'm moving out of that. But my question is this: when you're looking to seek financial support or investors, when you have to go see the banker, things like that, doesn't your personal credit history play a major part in when they're reviewing your business plan and whether they're going to invest in your business?
I'm going to say absolutely, positively yes. Because ultimately, people spend a lot of time working on their business plan, working on their proposal, working on their projections, working on their financials. But ultimately, an investment is an investment in the leader and the leadership team. That's really what they're putting their money in. And the better you are and the better that leadership team is, the more confidence your equity investors and your bankers and your financiers are going to have. So I would highly encourage you to be more focused on presenting your credibility as the foundation for what the financials say than trying to make the financials give you credibility.
So I have a question. Just first of all, you have a billion dollar leg cross right now. I just want to point that out. You cross your leg like you have been, you're very well off, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But in all seriousness, so in your presentation, you spoke about perspective, right? And I know that could be easier said than done for a lot of us, right? Because you go through things to look at things being with the glass half full as opposed to the glass half empty. How long did it take you to develop that train of thought? What did you go through? What steps did you have to take? And then a follow-up question is, when you, were you preparing for maybe a job loss, like while you had a job, while everything was fine? Was that something in the back of your mind, or are you just that meticulous with savings that whatever happens, you're always kind of prepared for?
I'm gonna answer your second question first, and then I'll go to the first question. So I had there's a motivational speaker by the name of Munroe. He passed several years ago, but he was somebody that I invested in his entire library back then, tell you how old I am. I bought all the cassette tapes, and then I got all the CDs and DVDs. And he said, build a financial wall around your family that nobody could get through. Actually, I didn't buy it. It was given to me as a gift for my 30th birthday by all my friends. I have good friends. And so they invested and gave me that. And he said, build a financial wall around your family that nothing can get through. And I heard that at 30 years old. And so I just started doing that, creating different mechanisms through insurance and savings and investments that would literally be a wall around my family that nothing could get through. Now, I didn't know if it would work. I just kept doing it. And then we found, it did actually work. I would say, Charles, I wasn't planning to have my professional life disrupted. I was expecting to ascend to the top and be a CEO of a Fortune 500 entity. Like, that was my goal. And I was on my way. But I think God had a different plan. And so in April of 2015, when GE announced that they were going to be selling GE Capital, I kind of pivoted and said, all right, since this is going to go down, and they approached me. I had opportunities to stay with GE. A mentor said, hey, move to Cincinnati and you can run this section of the business. And I was like, I love you, would love to work for you, but I'm not moving my family to Cincinnati. If you don't care where I am, then I'll just get a crash apartment and I'll commute and I'll handle that myself. And to his credit, he says, look, your daughter's small. I don't want you to miss those opportunities with your daughter. I'm not going to let you do that. We'll figure something else out. Well, we didn't figure anything else out, and I ended up going out. What I would say about how did I get to the place where I could have perspective, it's a lifelong journey. I think you are the sum of all your experiences and everything you expose yourself to and all that you learn. And you've been to the house, Charles, so you can see I invest heavily in learning. And so my most prized possessions aren't watches, cars, jewelry, and ring. It's my books. I have literally hundreds of books. And I'm not going to tell you I have read every book in my library, because I haven't, but I just feel smarter going into my library knowing that I have all that access, right? Mm-hmm. And the book you don't read won't help. And so I absolutely try to read. I buy things that I'm going to read, but I do have things on my shelf I haven't read. But there are books that I repeatedly return to because of the lessons and the wisdom in them. And I have literally thousands of cassettes and CDs of instruction and teaching that I go through. And if you go into my iPhone, you will find more stuff on leadership and wisdom around how to be better, wiser, stronger as a leader than you will pop music and stuff like that, because I believe the way to increase your value is to invest in yourself. And so that's how I prepare, and that's how I've developed the perspective.
Now, one thing you said as you...
Little girl has a question. You have a question?
This is Nia.
I told you were going to hear from her. She's not ashamed. She's not afraid.
Why did you forget the movie Black Panther, huh?
Why did I forget the movie Black Panther?
As things that you watch.
As what?
Things that you watch and online.
Oh, things that I watch. She wants you to know that we watched Black Panther together many times. Yes, that is something else.
That's one of his hobbies. Yes.
That's one of our topics.
So, Marc, one thing you said is, and it stood out to me because that's where I'm at. You can't be out of work and out of shape
Yes.
at the same time.
Yes. At the same time. Yes.
And it's funny because and I've been there where you blame it on life. I always say, well, life happens.
Yeah.
So when life is happening, meaning you're busy, something is going on in life, the gym takes second fiddle.
Yeah.
You know, eating healthy takes second fiddle. But then when life isn't happening and things are dead, it's like, okay, now I can go to the gym.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we have to find this balance.
Yes.
And then work and being in shape has to almost carry the same weight for you to want to do it at the same time.
Yes.
So if you follow me, you see that I work, but I'm also big on fitness, but I'm also big on looking and feeling a certain way in order to do my work.
Yep.
Because I can't travel and I can't be, real hyper and energy and be out of shape.
Yes.
And be able to travel from one plane. I'm on a plane on Monday and I'm playing on Thursday and then I have to go to work. So I have to almost be completely, fit and shape across the board. Mm-hmm. And so why was it for you that when life wasn't happening and you weren't so busy, what was it that said, okay, I need to invest in myself. I need to take care of my physical body?
Yeah, I think two things. One was I just had the time, right? I literally had time. And I wanted to be productive. Like I wanted to show something for the time. And when you start seeing results and you're looking in the mirror and you're like, man, this looks a little good. Like I need to keep this up. Mm-hmm. And so the way I got started was I started riding a bike, just literally riding a bike. When Jesse and I first got married, we went to a bike shop and we bought bikes. And Jesse has never used her bike. And I had used my bike sparingly. I took it back to the bike shop when I said I was going to start focusing on it. And the owner of the bike shop said, I sold you this bike 18 years ago. This company isn't even in business anymore. And this bike looks like it's in perfect shape. I said, yeah, it hasn't really gotten much use. I said, but I'm about to use it, so I wanted to make sure it was up to snuff. So they prepared the bike, and I literally started riding. Because I said to myself, I've never seen a fat cyclist. That was my rationale. Like, I've never seen a fat cyclist, so I said, if there's no such thing as a fat cyclist, let me ride a bike. And so I just started riding a bike, and I was doing an hour, then I was doing an hour and a half, and then one day I just said, let me see how far I can go. And I set a goal in my head to do 50 miles in one ride. And what I was doing was riding loops around a park. It was 1.5 miles per loop, and I remember when I called Charles and I was talking, I was like, Charles, I did 50 miles. He said, 50 miles? He said, in one ride? I said, yeah, man. I
How
said,
long did it take you?
It took me like 4 hours. I ain't telling you I was flying. It took, you start strong and then it gets tough. And that last 5 miles was hard, but I got it done. And I did it one more time in that summer between 16 and 17. And so those were just personal goals of being productive during that time.
So it's interesting to hear that success for you is success in any area and aspect of life. It's funny to hear him say, even when he didn't have a job and he would not have the time, it was all about being productive.
Yes.
And so what am I going to do to be productive? So he had to find something to do. He had to find something to work on. And so you said, well, let me work on myself.
Yep.
And I think that it's so important as leaders for us to be always productive, but for us to have success in not only in our professional life, but in your physical life, in your spiritual life, in your emotional life.
Absolutely.
And that's what you call a well-rounded, well-balanced leader. And sometimes that's hard to find. It's very, very hard to find.
Absolutely. I think you have to fight to be productive, right? Because life naturally takes you in a direction where productivity isn't automatic. And so part of what helped me be productive in that time as well was when I went back to school, I had to structure my days to be able to get through the work content for school. And so, again, if at the beginning, if on June 10th, 2016, God told me everything that would happen, I would have handled it a lot differently. I probably would have put my feet up and been like, yo, this is going to be a good ride. Because at the end, it's going to be so much fruit. But I think he doesn't share with us what the process is going to look like so that we're more engaged in it.
In the process.
In the process. And the other side, you come out on the other side better, wiser, stronger. And that's what I am.
And okay. Renee?
Hello. Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I didn't see. Hi, my name is Renee Morgan, and my question is, as a Christian leader in a Fortune 10 company, how did you balance ethics and morals in your decision making?
So for me, it wasn't a balance, right? At the end of the day, particularly in my field, when I was serving as a controller, I used to tell people I signed the rep letter. The rep letter is what goes to the SEC and other organizations that have the ability to give you a set of bracelets. And I told people, like, I'm not getting a set of bracelets, so if it endangers me, it's not getting done. And I was just very, very clear. And I remember one time when I became CFO of an organization, the controllers underneath me, they hadn't been signing rep letters. And so when I told them they needed to sign, one young lady started crying. And I said, well, I should be nervous then, because if you're crying, that means you did something you ain't supposed to do. And we dug in and we just made sure, like, if I have to put my name on something, it's got to be right, and it's not going to be misleading in any way. So I didn't have to balance. It was just straight target. I am who I am. And that's part of the reality, right? If you're going to lead, you lead out of who you are. And I didn't have to quote book, chapter, and verse to be who I am. It's in me. And because it's in me, it just comes out in the way that I lead, ethically, morally, righteously. Because, there are things that are legal, ethical, and moral, but if they violate me spiritually, I don't do them either. So.
But did you develop haters?
Oh, you can't lead in any sphere and not have people that hate you.
I love
right?
them. I love them.
Yeah, you need them.
I
so
love them.
Haters motivate you
Yes.
sometimes, right? Yeah.
Hi, Marc. By the way, great teaching. I got a lot from it. And the thing is, I think you just answered one of my questions. So I'll just go to the next one. Because the question actually is dealing with, I've noticed with my business and all of that, people change. And the thing is, the one thing that changes is the money. So let's just say you have your bunch of friends, everybody broke together, everybody happy.
Yeah.
But now when you decide, okay, I'm gonna try to do something with my life, then all of a sudden, the circle of friends, they start to shift. Mm-hmm. And then you just said the statement just now as far as dealing with haters and all that. Sometimes the most hurtful hate thing comes from the people who were in your who in your circle. Mm-hmm. So then my first question is then, okay, how do you deal with that? Because looking back, all right, you're from the States, I'm from the Bahamas, but then it's the same concept. Well, you got your guys coming up with you, and now you say, I'm gonna do something with my life. I'm tired of the situation that I'm in. Then they turn around and say, you're being bougie. Yeah. All of a sudden, you want to read now instead of going on the blocks and drinking with us. Yeah. So my question is, okay, if you had such a lasting relationship with them growing up as kids, and now you're getting this hater type thing, do you cut them off, or do you teach them? Say, look, it's a whole lot bigger than just these 5 seconds or these next 2 weeks you're thinking about. How do you deal with that? That's the first question. Okay. The second question is, I remember I asked Dr. Munroe this question and he laughed. I asked him, oh, Doc, what books do you read? And he said, okay, Todd, go get all my books. I got all his books. Then I came back to him 2 years later and I asked him, all right, I got all your books. Now, what books do you read? You see? So my question would be actually, well, especially when you're going through your process, what resources, as far as literary material, did you rely on or to help you through your process? Yeah,
and it's great that you mentioned Pop, because he said something that literally changed my life. I mean, he said lots of things that changed my life. If I shared with you everything he taught me, we'd be here a long time. But one thing he said, you have favorite restaurants, but you don't have a favorite author. And so I learned to cultivate favorite authors. So obviously he's one of them. A guy named Henry Cloud is one. A guy named John Townsend is another. A guy named Ed Cole, Dr. Edwin Lewis Cole is one. So I read up, down, and across the leadership genre. And if you come in my house, you'll find I basically have it in 4 categories. There's leadership, there's relationship, there's communication, and there's finances. Now somebody says, oh, you don't read history? Well, history falls under one of those four things for me. And so I read biographies of people that fit in those four things. But for me, it's leadership, relationships, communication, and finance. That's kind of the four categories of resources I focus on. To your question about how do I deal with relationships and the transitions as you go from one level to another, there are people who have been literally in my life with me right now since I was 8 years old. But that doesn't mean that the intensity of the relationship is what it was since we were 8 years old. So I have, Jesus had his three. Jesus had the 1, the 3, the 12, the 500, and the multitudes, right? There's different rings of intimacy, proximity, and closeness. And so there are people literally who used to be very, very close who are now levels removed because of decisions they have made which I am not in favor of and could jeopardize me and where I'm trying to go. And there are decisions I'm making that they're not in favor of, and so distance just gets naturally created. Then there are instances where your values collide, right? I grew up, if you guys watch Power, that's another show I watch. If you guys watch Power, that's my neighborhood. 50 Cent grew up in my neighborhood. And that whole narrative is a narrative I'm very familiar with because I came up when the crack game really exploded in South Jamaica, Queens. And so when you hear them talk about 40 projects and Baisley projects in their music, that's literally my neighborhood. And I know the names and the faces of the people that they're talking about, and they would know me because I played in basketball tournaments for them, all that kind of stuff. And so there are people who literally I ate milk and cookies with and did hot cocoa and made snowmen with who became murderers, legitimately serving life sentences in prison because they got involved in the crack game. I couldn't get involved in the crack game because I couldn't explain to my mother where those sneakers and stuff would come from. That would not work in my house. But I know people, right? And just recently I was in the park going to visit my mom, and I saw a guy who I hadn't seen in 30 years because he had been away for 30 years, legitimately. And so those kinds of things, people make decisions and it creates distance. And you can have transactional interaction, but you can't have intimate interaction because the values are so much different. And you just have to be comfortable with that.
Antoine?
Yeah. How do you suggest nudging people from the loser's mentality into the winner's mentality?
So I think the first thing is exposure, right? I mean, when I was sitting in the classroom and the professor was teaching this whole concept of learned helplessness, my mind the lights went off like, wow. And so you have people who don't realize that they're involved in learned helplessness, and so just exposing them to what it means helps them be able to be aware. And I don't think you can change anything until you're aware. So helping increase somebody's awareness is the first step. And then helping them get access to tools and information that can redirect their energy and their focus, to me, is the second step. And then the third step is modeling it, right? You make them aware, you give them access to resources, and then you model it for them. Like, people tell me that the way I handled that 19 months inspires them. Well, they're inspired because they were exposed to how they were able to see me process through it. And it doesn't mean I did it perfectly, because I know I didn't do it perfectly, but I did it. And doing it is part of the quote-unquote magic of transformation. Mia.
Hi. Nice to meet you. My name is Mia. Appreciate your talk. One question I have in particular is, how do you manage your rest habits? So I think coming from the mentality of putting an emphasis on the value of time, and then, you know, you mentioned Netflix or some of those things, but from my experience, there is almost a mental permission that needs to happen to manage rest rather than just going and knowing that, hey, time is precious, how come I'm not being productive almost every moment? So I'm more curious about how do you either self-talk to give permission, how do you manage it so it's the appropriate amount of time and not overextend those chill habits, you know, and something that comes to mind obviously is just honoring even Sabbath. Does that play a part in your life, or what does that look like?
So this is one part where me and Pop kind of diverged, because Pop used to say, you'll be dead longer than you're alive, so you can't sleep. Nobody that sleeps 8 hours changes the world. I try to get 8 hours. I'm not good if I don't get 8 hours. I need sleep. If I'm on a 5-hour thing, something's going to go wrong, right? So I need sleep. But then I do give myself permission. Like I schedule in, you know, what my wife will tell you is I'm very good at delegation. And so because I'm very good at delegation, I create free space. And so because I can create free space, I can give myself opportunities to rest.
That's good.
So I would tell you, if you haven't perfected the ability to delegate, that's why you don't have the capacity to rest, because you're doing too much. And I could teach a class on delegation because I'm really good at it.
That comes up as a big factor on that, so that would be a follow-up question, but thank you.
Write that down.
How you doing, bro?
Good. So my question, I'll just take this out, is about reflection and really advice on what you would do differently if you go back to being 30, 35. What do you think you can do differently, or what would you do differently that will put you much further than you are right now?
Man, that's a great question. So there's two things I absolutely would do differently in my 30s than as I now approach my 50s. In my 30s, I definitely would have created more streams of revenue than I did in a professional career. Like, I put my 100% focus on building my professional career in corporate America to become a corporate executive. That was the goal, that was the focus. And I don't regret it, but I recognize how limiting it was to just do corporate America. So I would absolutely create an alternate stream of revenue, or alternate streams of revenue for myself and my family. And then two, I probably would have traveled more. Like, there were things that I thought I had more time to do when actually you don't, right? And I learned this after the fact. You know, if there's, like, let's say this conference is once a year, right? And you go, I'll go next year. Well, if you live 20 more years, that means you only see people here once when you come to the conference. That means you only got 20 more times to see them. And each time you miss the conference, that's one less time you're going to see them. So being able to see people more through travel is something I would have done differently. Because there are people who I would have seen more if I would have traveled more. And, you know, some of them are relatives, some of them are friends, and now they're not here. And so travel more.
Is the traveling and the stream of revenue go hand in hand?
They could.
You would have traveled more if you had revenue, you had money.
No, I think I had enough money. Like, airline travel isn't that expensive, right? It's not. The thing that gets expensive is the hotel room and the eating, right? But so if you're going to go see your people, you can crash at their crib, right? Save some money. But I think if I did have more money, I would have traveled to more exotic places, right? And, you know, that's why I'm working on this list. I turn 50 next year, and I'm going to have this list of 50 things that I'm going to do, and some exotic places. Like, you know, you and Charo, y'all been to Israel, and y'all go to Africa, y'all go to Egypt. I'm going, like, I'm probably going with y'all to Israel next year. I'm probably going to go to Africa with y'all. These are all my goals. So, yeah. And that means I got to have money because, Nia and Jesse going to want to come. And so, yeah.
I was wondering from a business perspective of management and discipline, where did you learn? Do you have any techniques? Because obviously Dr. Munroe taught, where there is no management, there's no growth.
Absolutely. So again, Pop was, he, outside of my family, outside of my mother and father, Pop was probably the most influential person in my life. Literally, the way Jessie and I started dating was because I asked her if she had heard of him. And when she told me she heard of him, I knew she was the kind of woman I should kind of get to know. Because this was when Understanding Your Potential had first come out, and she had already read the book, and she had seen him on TBN and stuff like that. So Pop has had a tremendous influence on me and how I think about management and responsibility. But then I went to school, and I went to coursework at GE, and I read lots of stuff. John Maxwell has had an influence. But it's just books. Books, resources, teaching, exposure. Because I didn't grow up with a Fortune 10 executive in my house. My mother's an educator, my dad's a bus driver. I don't have Fortune 10 executives in my family circle. That's not, the pedigree I come from, right? But it's the pedigree God has graced me to develop into because I invested. My parents placed a high value on education. And I just embodied those things. And then I had people like Pastor Munroe and other leaders who I really admired. And I understood, one thing Pop said in a presentation one time was, people consider me a gift. He said, this is not a gift. This is a result of work. I read 3 books a month. He said 3 books a week. I read 3 books a week. That's not a gift. That's a result. And I was like, man, how could this dude find time to read 3 books in a week? I'm like, I gotta at least do it in a month. I know I couldn't do it in a week, but I'm like, and so I just upped my game. And people set goals, and I would set goals for how many books in a year I would read. And you can check my list. I hit my goals. I read these books. I get through the material. If I'm similar to do it, when I was with Pop, I'm like, hey, what you reading? And he recommend a book. I'm buying the book and I'm reading the book. And it's, to me, I think this is the mistake most people make. They read a book and they try to understand everything in the book. And for me, I'm just looking for the one idea in the book that I can apply. I may not be able to remember a whole bunch of everything in the book, but there's something in that book that I'm going to remember and I'm going to apply and I'm going to make it work. And that's just how I developed my approach. I've wanted to be a leader, and I knew to be a leader, I heard it said years ago, leaders are readers and readers are leaders. And so I just took it seriously and I read. If you look at my knapsack right now, there's a book. If you look on my Kindle, there's a book. There's a magazine, there's an article, there's a blog. If you look on my phone, reading and being able to, because I heard somebody say, you may not be able to do everything you know, but you should at least know it all. And that's what I pursue. I try to pursue as much knowledge as possible.
That's amazing. Any other questions? So Marc, you said you didn't come from this pedigree of Fortune 500. Mm-hmm. But what has made you, I guess from even young, what made you kind of want to develop, I want to be better, I want to be great? My dad talks about, being poor and coming from a poor home, and he was the only one that went to school. And he was the only one that went to school, and then now look at him. My brother and I are a little different. We come from this pedigree where we have this foundation of, education is important, you're going to be a leader, you're going to be great. So where did you find that? When did yours begin?
I'm going to say I was born with it, right? I think you're wired, right? You come to the planet with a purpose. And it's funny that Charles selected the topic of winner's mentality, because if you were to talk to my siblings, they'll tell you I'm a sore loser, right? And I've been that way my whole life. I hate losing. Losing is nothing. Like, I remember I'd lose a baseball game and my mother would say, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And I'm like, no, you should be playing well enough to win. Like, that's always been the way I thought. Like, I hate losing. And once I was exposed to the possibility, like, I never forget, I saw the book with Reginald Lewis on the cover, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun, where he had the cigar in his mouth and he's on the cover of the book, and it's about the buyout of Beatrice Lilly, and he was the face of, you know, this enterprise. And, you know, Earl Graves, who ran Black Enterprise, and, you know, Bill Cosby, and just these men who looked like me, who were significant and successful. And then, you know, you're in church and you see Dr. Munroe, and you see Fred Price, and you see Creflo Dollar, and you see just other leaders who are doing things at a level of excellence that inspires you. And you say, if I apply myself, what's possible? Right? Because the thing about great leaders is they make you feel like you can do it too. And that's what they make greatness feel accessible. And what I have found is I've been influenced by leaders who made greatness seem accessible, and it just whet my appetite to do the disciplines and engage in the diligence to see if they were telling me the truth. And, you know, the story is still being written, but I feel like my life is having the impact it's having because I followed in the footsteps of great men and great women. Let me not leave out the women, like my mother and some others who are significant influences in how I turned out. And I just think when you have the right influences pouring in, it raises your expectation of yourself, and it increases your discipline and your focus, and the outcomes become the natural sequential audit result of being focused and expressing your potential.
I have so many questions. One more, and then we are going to move on to MEL Talk 2.
Okay.
So learn, network, relax.
Yep.
You talk about learning as far as resources, read.
Yep.
Relaxation, you talked about how that balance and what you like to do.
Yep.
Network, what's been some of your networking, what's your networking tactic, and how do you network when it comes to your personal life, but especially your business, professional life?
Yeah, and this is not a shameless self-plug, but it is something, I'm big on LinkedIn and using it as a tool. And I posted something about 3 years ago on networking, talking about the purpose, the premise, and the potential of network, and the power of networking. And I basically said that most people think of networking like a car salesman, and they're trying to sell you something, or just shaking hands and kissing babies. But networking really is a mutually beneficial exchange to solve a problem. When you know what your value proposition is, and you're engaging here in MEL, and you talk to a person and they have a need, you know if you or someone you know represents a solution to the challenge or the need or the problem. And connecting them is networking. It's that simple, it's that important, it's that powerful. That you have to first understand what it is you bring to the table, and then understanding that you connect to what people need and you bring it together. That's what I do, professionally, personally.
What is it not?
Networking is not taking advantage of people. Networking is not trying to get something for nothing. Networking is not trying to put things on people's backs to free yourself up. It's not, a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not direct selling or multi-level marketing. That's not what networking is. And I'm not saying those aren't things you can be involved in. I'm just saying that they call it network marketing, but network marketing is not networking. Network marketing is an entirely different industry and has its own set of challenges and problems. But networking is connecting with people for a mutually beneficial exchange.
That is good. Network. Say that one more time.
Networking is connecting with people for a mutually beneficial exchange.
Yes, that is good. I'm going to write that down. Thank you, Marc.
Thanks,
Appreciate
sis.
it. It's been
Love you.
wonderful. Any other questions before we end? No?
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.